have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation
Land of
for
ours,
the
I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you
blessings we
to another edition of I'm really confused tonight. Another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we face and that affects so many areas of our life, from our families to our communities to our societies, and even in our corporate boardrooms, our businesses, our free enterprises. This is a country based on the notion that people can govern their own affairs and they can create their own enterprises, and things all work out pretty well. Actually, you leave free people with their own moral conscience, a well-developed conscience. You leave such folks alone. You don't oppress them in any way. They do wonderful things, and they create opportunities not just for themselves, but for other people, and that's how the system works. We've had many pioneers in various areas help build a wonderful place to live and work. But all of that is threatened these days by the character crisis that we face, and so that's why I write about it in my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, the international bestseller on how to deal with those people that make you feel crazy, because you know darn well there's something up with them, but they make you think that there's something wrong with you, and try to get the better of you in those covert ways that I talk about in my books. Also my book, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, where I talk about all the various disturbed character types and how to deal with them, and especially how to get the right kind of help when you're trying to procure help for yourself in dealing with these folks. And then, of course, my book for the Christian faith community, The Judas Syndrome, about how genuine faith can truly transform a life. And then my most recent book with Dr. Kathy Armistead, How Did We End Up Here? The book for those of you who are either in the midst of or have come to the end of a toxic relationship, and you're asking yourself the question, how you got here, how somebody who you thought once hung the moon could turn out to be such an unfortunate character and bring so much pain into your life, and how to become a better judge of things so that you don't repeat the same kind of scenarios in the future. So that's that. I have another book coming out with Dr. Armistead at the end of the summer, the 10 Commandments of Character. So be looking for that. Those are the life lessons that we need to learn, not just when we're growing and developing in childhood and adolescence, but those lessons that we have to learn at any stage in our life in order to be the kind of people that we have it within us to be. So look for the Ten Commandments of Character, how to lead a significant life toward the end of the summer. And then check out my blogs also at manipulative-people.com. That's www.manipulative-people.com, where right now the series of articles that I've got and just posted another one last Friday, as I do every Friday afternoon, is previewing some of the content of my book coming up with Dr. Armistead called The Ten Commandments of Character. We're on character commandment number 4 right now, the importance of respecting the truth. I think you'll find that series of articles very timely and interesting. And if you want to join the conversation, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'll be happy to take your call. Tonight we have a very special program for you and a very special guest, because we're going to talk about how much character matters in the workplace from an expert who's been there, done that, so to speak, and knows full well how essential it is in today's business environment to have folks of character working in an organization. And, you know, a family is only as strong as the character of the folks within the family is, and a community is only as strong as the number of folks with strong character in the community, and businesses are only as strong and as viable. They will eventually bring themselves down. They will eventually run into trouble. They will eventually run into financial disaster if they're not of solid character. The corporate culture, the values promoted, these things mean a lot. We may think that they don't. We may think it's all about money, but businesses that operate that way may prosper for a while, but in the end, character always has its say. And that's why I titled this program Character Matters, because it matters in every single aspect of our lives. And business is one of those places. So I'm so pleased to have as my special guest tonight Patricia A. Flaherty. And Patricia has a number of distinctions. She's held senior corporate leadership positions in Fortune 100 companies such as MCI and Ford Motor Company, and she helped formulate the behaviors that Ford candidates are assessed against during the interview process. She is an expert at putting your best foot forward, and she's going to talk about, as you'll hear in just a bit, the 3 C's that folks in the corporate world and in the business world in general are looking for in employees these days. And you would never guess right offhand what that first C stands for in the 3 C's that matter to them. And so we're going to ask Patricia about that in just a little bit. Patricia has one other distinction, however, that probably you do not know about. Maybe you've read something about Patricia. Maybe you've seen one of her interviews on TV. Perhaps you've even got her book, The Interview Answer, a CreateSpace publication, fairly new this year. A great little read, a very short, quick, to the point read, easy read. 10 essential tips for acing your job interview. The Interview Answer by Patricia A. Flaherty. You can get it on Amazon.com. You can get it both in the paperback version as well as the ebook version. But in addition to that, in addition to being now a famous author, Patricia has the great distinction of being my sister. My second youngest sister. I have one sister younger than me, and then my sister Patty. May I call you Patty?
You may.
Is below her, and I have the greatest respect for Patty because, for 2 reasons. One, she really knows what she's talking about. And secondly, um, I had a lot of misconceptions myself about what folks were looking for in the business environment. And to hear from her about the three C's that folks are looking for in corporate America in a great candidate for employment, I'll let her talk to you about that. But in hearing her talk to me about it, I was more than edified and kind of validated in my belief that character matters more than anything else. And perhaps you have experience with character matters in the workplace. Perhaps you've employed people. Perhaps you've been an employee. Perhaps you've had to work with a coworker, a problem coworker of questionable character, making your life quite difficult and miserable and hurting company operations. Whatever the case may be, feel free to join the conversation. Maybe you'll have a question of Patricia as we get through the program. And if you do, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'll be happy to take your call. As a matter of fact, I'll be happy to take your call on just about anything you want to talk about tonight. I also want to thank the attendees at my workshops these past couple of weeks. I just came from the Western New York tour where I was speaking in Syracuse and in Buffalo and Rochester, New York. A great attendance at the workshops there. Some really great folks that I met. And I thank you for your participation. And I invite you, whether you be a mental health professional or just an average person who wants to come to one of my training workshops, even though they're geared for professionals and unfortunately priced accordingly, all are welcome to the workshops. You can find information on those workshops on my blog site at manipulative-people.com. Just page on over through the site map to the page for webinars and seminars and workshops, and you'll find all the details there. And you can also go to the Cross Country Education, crosscountry-education.com, and search by name for my live workshops. That's Dr. George Simon, Simon, and you'll get the full roster of schedule. I think now the roster is up through October, even though we have more workshops planned. I think you can find out the schedule through October by going to the Cross Country Education site. Well, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest for tonight, Patricia A. Flaherty. And I mentioned that you've been in corporate environments in some pretty impressive companies. And you were talking to me earlier, Patty, about the three C's. I thought that was very important. You mentioned the three C's that folks are really looking for, folks who are seeking to employ an individual, whether they be at the large corporation level, at the smaller organization level. Employers are really looking for three things that really matter. They say in real estate, the three things that count are location, 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 right? There are three things that really matter to an employer, right? When they're interviewing somebody and they're looking for a prospective candidate. And you were mentioning the three C's. What are those three C's?
Thank you, George. Yeah, I'd be happy to tell you about them. And I say at the beginning of my book, The Interview Answer, whether or not they are conscious or unconscious about this, employers are always looking and, more importantly, listening as you're speaking for these three C's. And the first of those C's is character. So it's really appropriate.
Did you hear that, folks? Character really does count.
The first is character, first and foremost. And the second is competence. And competence means your knowledge and your skills and your experience. And the third is your chemistry or compatibility. Think about somebody that you might, want to date. There has to be a certain amount of chemistry or compatibility. You want to spend some time with them. You want to hang out with them. Well, employers are looking for those three things. But first and foremost, the reason it's listed as number one is character.
Yeah. Uh, in that regard, I wanted to ask a couple of questions, if you don't mind. In regard to the character department, it seems to me that there would be certain aspects of character that an employer would really be interested. In other words, traits of character that would really be overjoyed to find
Absolutely.
in an individual. And then there would also be some traits in character that would be a real red flag and maybe send up the warning sign that we got something to be concerned about here, and that would be a turnoff to a prospective employer. So, if you wouldn't mind, let's start with the positive aspects of character. Maybe one of the two aspects of character that would signal to an employer, this is the person we might really want to consider bringing on board.
Absolutely. The importance of character, and I'll talk about those exact positive traits that employers are looking for, is that employers have one shot during the interview, is their only shot of getting people of good character into that organization or keeping them out of their organization.
And why is that?
Well, because competence can be groomed. Knowledge and skills can be groomed. You wouldn't even be at an interview if your resume didn't show that you had some degree of the required knowledge and skills and experience that the employer was looking for.
Yeah.
But character is formed at a very early stage in your development. By the time you're looking for a job, it's pretty well solidified. An employer can't send you to a training class to improve your character. They can't do much about it. It's pretty much baked. So their best shot of getting the people of desired character is during that interview.
Mm-hmm.
If they miss that mark, then they've got somebody on board in their organization who's going to be hard to work with, and even if they have to let them go, it's even going to be difficult to fire.
All right, so right from the get-go, the employer is looking at character.
Absolutely. If they aren't, they're missing the mark. If they aren't paying careful attention to that, it's their one and only shot. They can't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
They can't change it.
And it would make sense that it's going to cost them in the long run, and in more than just headache on the job. Let's just say that a person really has some trouble. Let's say they can't work with their coworkers or whatever the case may be, and then they have to be perhaps referred through the company's EAP to get some help. You say that character really can't be, it's one of the things you can't groom, and you're just going to have to deal with it in other ways. That gets to be an expensive proposition. Right?
Absolutely. It can be expensive in many ways, and even literally. If some of the character traits that you asked about that employers are looking for, honesty, integrity, teamsmanship, the things that you talked about, I mean, it could literally be expensive if the person isn't honest and doesn't have integrity and is fraudulent and embezzles from a company. Those are kinds of character traits that employers really care about. Initiatives, self-starter, somebody who's going to take responsibility, get the job done. Those are character traits. Those are things that aren't going to be groomed in any kind of competence building seminar.
Yeah. You know, on this program, we talk an awful lot. I get a lot of callers call in. We do have a lot of discussion about our age and what seems to be entitlement, where folks kind of have a sense many times that the world owes them as opposed to them really owing anything to the world. Maybe feeling a sense of obligation to not only have developed themselves, but to be ready to make a meaningful contribution. And they're constantly kind of thinking, what is it you can do for me?
Absolutely.
As opposed to, what is it that I can do for you? Would you speak to that just a little bit?
My favorite chapter in my own book, The Interview Answer, is chapter 3, which the book is subtitled as Dr. Simon said, 10 essential tips to acing your job interview. And tip number 3 says, realize that it's not all about you, because that directly hits this entitlement thing. And that comes across in an interview, not only in the way you answer questions that the interview poses to you, but the questions that you ask of the interviewer. The questions that you ask of the interviewer, which is a whole nother tip in the book, a whole nother chapter dedicated to what kinds of questions you ask and don't ask. Because if you go into the part of the interview where they say, "What questions do you have of me?" and you say, "When are you going to give me a promotion? What kind of bonuses do you give?" and make this thing all about what they can do for you, this entitlement era,
Mhm.
that says a lot about your character to the
Mhm.
interviewer. They are deducing your character in everything you answer that they ask you and everything that you ask.
Mhm.
Your character is being analyzed.
Now, is there any particular place within the corporate structure where that matters more, or is this a pretty universal thing? In other words, if you're looking for kind of a line level job versus, say, a entry level management job, mid level management job, is there any place where that is more crucial than others, or is this something that's important all the way up the chain?
Good character traits are fundamental at any point in your career. People want to work with people they trust. Well, think about it this way. You all know people. Think of your friends, think of your family members who are probably some of the most skilled people that you know, the most competent people that you know. But you yourself, if you were hiring, would not hire them. Or if a good friend of yours was hiring for a position, you would not recommend them for hire. Why is that?
Mhm.
Even if they were one of the most brilliant, skilled, knowledgeable, competent person in the whole world, why is it that you would hesitate to hire them yourself or hesitate to recommend them to somebody else for hire? Character.
That's always the issue.
It's always the issue.
Yeah, character does matter. And perhaps some of you out there have had experience with that either on one end or the other of the dilemma. Perhaps either you've had to try and hire someone, or perhaps you've had difficulty landing a job. Perhaps you've been working alongside someone who you wondered what in the world your employer was thinking when they hired that person. Or perhaps you've tried to deal with that person and not effectively and have been stymied by the fact that no one seems to have the right answer for how to deal with this person. In any case, if you have a question you want to ask, either Patricia Flaherty or myself, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296, and we'll be happy to take your call. Of course, you can call on any of the other topics, including any of the issues raised in the blog articles this week, or any of the articles for that matter on the blog. I also forgot to mention the counseling resource blog at Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life. That's counseling resource with two L's because it's based in Britain. www.counselingresource.com. Another great source of information with many of my articles. You mentioned the other two issues in the three C's, competence being the second one, and you were mentioned that's one of those things that can't be groomed, right? That can be groomed, whereas character is one of those things you've got to be presenting at least on the front end. But competence can be groomed. Speak a little bit about that, Steve. And
Sure.
it's important.
Sure. Well, there's a certain level of competence. If you look at the job description, I spend a lot of time in the book, The Interview Answer, talking about the importance of the job description, the position description, because it pretty much lays out the character traits and the competencies that the employer is looking for. It's like having the answer key to the test. So if you don't pay attention to the job description, you're actually missing out because it's got the answers to the test that you're going to be given when you go to a job interview. And the competencies are often listed on a job description as required or preferred. Required are generally just that. Those are the table stakes, the price of admission. If your resume doesn't show you have it, you probably aren't even going to be interviewed. But once you're there, they will often try to assess your level of competence, your knowledge. So you might even have a technical screen, a technical interview on whatever discipline that it is that you're being interviewed for a job in. But there's some that are preferred. And what that means is I'd like you to have it, but I'm willing to groom those. If you don't have them walking in the door, It's a nice to have. The required are generally a must have. And they can tell that right off the bat. And they're testing for that in the interview. But then, and they might even give you a physical test or a demonstration of some sort to see if you've got the required. But preferred, they're often saying, I'm willing to have some degree, 10%, 20% of what I'm looking for, I'm willing to teach you on the job.
That's great. And the third C?
Chemistry, chemistry, compatibility, chemistry. That's just simply people like to work with people they like. They're going to hang around with you a long time. Even if the interviewer isn't the person you're going to sit beside, they're thinking about the people that you're going to sit beside and saying, am I going to introduce a person into that group who people are going to want to be around, going to want to work with? It's kind of like going on a date. You know, you can have somebody who has a great fact sheet. They have got all the things that you'd want on a checklist in a mate. But if there's no spark, if there's no chemistry, you don't really want to spend a lot of time with them, you're not going to marry them. Just like an interviewer is not going to ask you to marry into their organization if there's no chemistry.
Yeah, it sounds to me, though, that this would be at least a little still related to the character issue because corporations have their own kind of character. And so it sounds like this is kind of like a compatibility issue, right? And so character enters into it just a little bit.
It does. In fact, a corporation's character is often called the corporation's culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, people want to know if the person that they're interviewing is going to fit well, play well, perform well in the organization's culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's well said.
That's great. Well, you know, this is a topic that I think that we could probably do maybe 2 or 3 shows on, but I'm glad to have the opportunity to have Patricia Flaherty here with me today. But if you have a question you want to ask Patricia, specific to the interview process or specifically to the question of how character relates to landing a job, keeping a job, moving up within the corporation, or perhaps you even have a question about dealing with certain kinds of corporate cultures or the character of coworkers that has been a problem for you, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Of course, you don't have to limit yourself to just that topic. If you want to give us a call for some other reason, I'm happy to take your call. You know, one of the things that's really been an interest of mine over the last couple of years are the different types of corporate climates and corporate cultures. For example, I'm not going to mention any names, and people could do their own math here, so to speak, because there are many for-profit universities these days. There are actually 10 major ones, a couple more major than others. So we're not going to mention any names, but I have experience with a couple of these for-profit players. And what I found, I actually worked as a professor in a couple of these settings. What I found was there was a very definite character to the organization. It was more than just the atmosphere and the culture. The organization, you know, in the eyes of the law, corporations are viewed as persons. And I think that there's a reason for that. Because a corporation has a kind of an identity that it develops. And I found in this environment an identity or an image or a personality to these 2 places that I'm familiar with, that I won't mention their names, that if these organizations were a person living next door to me, I probably would never say hi to them. As a matter of fact, I probably would wish they would move someplace else. Because their very identity, the way they did business, the way they conducted their affairs, the values they seemed to promote, the ways they tended to deal with people, and just their overall, what I call modus operandi, went counter to many of my core values. And so I had to get out. There was no way I was sticking around. It wouldn't have mattered to me how much money they would have tried to throw at me. I wouldn't have done it. I thought that they were basically greedy, that they had an agenda for making money, which is fine. You know, I like to make money just like anybody else. You know, we need to make money, but that seemed to be too much of the prime agenda. And and then the other issue seemed to be uh, that, um, for a lack of a better word, there was a lack of genuineness to the product that they offered, and they knew it. They were basically selling a bill of goods not just to the person attending, but they were selling a bill of goods to to the organizations that they were trying to pawn off their graduates to. And so that was very unnerving to me. And I found myself not being able to work in this environment because you talk about the chemistry, my chemistry and their chemistry
Didn't it?
just didn't match, and I wanted out of there. I'm just wondering, in all the corporations that you've been around, right? And you've been in some pretty powerful corporations. Uh, Say a little bit about the corporate identity thing in those kinds of environments you found yourself in, where you might have had to say to yourself, "This is probably not the place for me," and where the corporate character has something to do with that.
Oh, that's a very astute insight about the chemistry match and the cultural match of the corporation. Yes, they do have an identity, and it's not unlike your book, In Sheep's Clothing, and I'll tell you why. Um, the Edgar Schein is wrote the seminal work on corporate culture, and from his work, I taught a course actually at my last company on corporate culture, and it shows an iceberg, and the iceberg shows what's showing above the waterline and what's below the waterline. Above the waterline is what the corporation says it is. It's what's called espoused values.
Hmm.
This is the plaques on the wall. You see all kinds of artifacts, as Edgar Schein calls them, on the walls. These are our values. This is our creed. This is what we believe in. This is what's important to us. Below the waterline is what they really value, what really matters. And when there's a disconnect between what's below the waterline and what's above the waterline, just like in sheep's clothing,
Hmm.
when you say what the face of the person is and what they say they are is not necessarily what they actually are,
Hmm.
that's a problem. That's a problem for the people who work there. That's a problem for the consumer. You don't want to live next door to that neighbor. You don't want to live inside their house.
Yeah, and you know what happens so much often in dysfunctional relationships, especially in manipulative relationships, when somebody hooks up with the archetypal wolf in sheep's clothing, it's like getting whiplash, I say in my book. You don't really know what's happened until after the damage is done, unfortunately, because some folks are really good at what we call the art of impression management, which is they can put on a good face. Everything looks really good at first, and then only later do you realize how you've been duped as to what's really there. That can happen in interpersonal relationships. That can happen in the corporate environment too. And so, what would you look for?
I would look for a company that puts their money where their mouth is, literally. I use an example in my book, The Interview Answer, which actually talks about, and I don't know how old our audience members are, how many of you can remember in the 1980s, the Tylenol tampering scare, where someone went in and laced Tylenol bottles with poison. And Johnson and Johnson, the company that produced it, had a very, very above the waterline iceberg stated espoused values about we hold the safety of our customers first, we hold above profit, above, they call it their credo, it's on every one of their websites. And that's when the test really comes. When something like that happens, what does the company do? And in that case, they show tremendous synchronicity between what was above the waterline, what was below the waterline.
They showed character.
They showed character. They pulled not just from the stores that had tampered Tylenol bottles. They pulled from every shelf of every store, every Tylenol bottle. Tremendous loss of revenue for them. But they were going to take no risks, no risks. They created the first tamper-proof. Now we all have to deal with those
Right.
bottles and
Right.
those seals and
Right.
stuff, but they went through tremendous effort because they lived those values.
So
and
they literally
lived-
put their money where their mouth was.
They did, and they showed character. I
Mhm.
use that example in my book, The Interview Answer, because I think that's a great testament of character. And I use it when a person actually is responding to an answer to the question, why do you want to work here? And the person and the company in the fictitious example was J&J. And the person actually talked about they are aligned with my value system and I have that kind of chemistry with them. I want to work for them.
Mhm.
So that alliance, that kind of match is critical.
Mhm.
The company culture. And how do you know? Because they live those values. They don't just espouse them.
Mhm. You know, I imagine that the amount of money that it cost Johnson and Johnson at that time was no small chunk of
Billions.
change. And in today's dollars, it would be even more. Uh, uh, those kinds of things can really can really threaten a company's even existence, right? But what you're saying is that they wouldn't have been the company that they claimed they were, and it wouldn't have taken long for them to meet some kind of demise if they hadn't done that.
Right.
So really, character does not only matter, but it pays in the long run.
In the long run.
In the long run. Very interesting. Well, what a great conversation we're having today with Patricia A. Flaherty, author of The Interview Answer, 10 Essential Tips for Acing Your Job Interview. But as you can tell already from our interview, this little book, and it's a very easy, very brief, to the point book. It is a guide to landing the job of your dreams. That's no question about that. But as you can tell from our brief interview here today, it's far more than that. There's a whole lot packed into this book, a whole lot that really speaks to what it is not only that a company is looking for in you, but what you can bring to your efforts within any organization and fulfill not only your dreams, but fulfill yourself. You know, in many ways, it's all about growth, not just personal growth, but organizational growth. Uh, uh, our businesses, our enterprises, all of our human enterprises, they are growing concerns. In our kind of environment, if you're not growing, if you're stagnating, or if, God forbid, you're going backwards, you're eventually not going to be around very long. You've got to be growing and developing, and this is a great read for anyone who's really wanting to not only develop themselves, but to put their best foot forward. So I advise you to look up, I recommend that you look up The Interview Answer, 10 Essential Tips for Acing Your Job Interview. You can get it as a paperback or as an ebook from Amazon. It's a CreateSpace publication. I think you could probably get it on Amazon Prime with next day delivery, right? Or 2-day delivery?
Probably. It's also available on barnesandnoble.com.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And how about iBooks?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We're working on it.
Okay. Well, if you want to join the conversation, if you have a question, not just about character in the workplace, but just in general, or if you have a question you want to ask me, just give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 717-8296. I'll repeat that one more time, 718-717-8296. Give us a call, and I'm happy to take your call. How does an interview, uh, how does an interview candidate not only present the best face, but how does an interviewer really assess? I mean, how do they go about the process of figuring out basically who you are as a person and whether you're the person for the job? How do they do that?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that because there is a technique that interviewers use, and it seems very, very, oh,
Complex or mysterious?
well, no, it seems kind of easy conversation, but in actuality, they're assessing your character. The technique is called behavioral event interviewing, or BEI. And some of you who may have been interviewed have probably had the interview ask you to tell them a story. Tell me a story. Tell me about a time. Describe for me a time when, and they'll say something like, "Tell me about a time when you had to work with a difficult employee," or "Tell me about a time when something went wrong on a project. Just tell me about it. What happened? What did you do? What was the outcome?" Sounds pretty innocuous, doesn't sound very harmful, sounds very easy, and you start telling a story. Well, the interviewer is actually not, they don't really care about the specifics of that story. They don't care about the actual project you worked on. They don't really care about the person that you had worked with who was difficult. What they're listening for is your behaviors, which is why it was called is called behavioral event interviewing. And by your behaviors, they are deducing your character, your competence, and your chemistry. They're listening very hard to what you did, how you did it, and what your character traits are that came out in that interview, in that story.
So how about an example? Can you think of an example where telling a story about how you handled a situation or whatever is going to reveal those things about your character?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to give you two possible answers to the same interview question, and then I'll let you deduce the character with me.
Okay.
So the interview says, tell me about a time that you worked on a project that didn't come in on time, didn't go well. Project didn't go well. What happened? And so candidate A says, "Well, I had this horrible project where all the people, it was a global project and everybody was on different time zones and everybody was not communicating well and we didn't have a good system to communicate and everybody didn't come together as a team, and so I just said, the heck with them. I'm just going to go off and do my part of the project. The whole project's not going to come in on time, but I'm just going to go off and do my piece, and so when it's all done, nobody can blame me. I did my part, and the project didn't come in on time. It was a big disaster. The customer was unhappy. We lost revenue. And what lesson I took away from that? Lesson I learned was I'm never going to work on a global team again, and never want to see those people ever again." Okay, candidate A. Candidate A, that's their answer. Let's hold the analysis for a second and go to candidate B. Same project, same situation. Global project, nobody knew how to communicate together, and it was a dicey situation, and this person said, "You know what? We need a communication strategy and we need a plan." So what he did, he said, "What I did in that situation is I called all the players together and we set up a communication schedule. We took into account the time zones. The project still was delayed because we didn't get the communication plan in place until midway through the project. But what I took away from that lesson was that in every future project, I will make sure that there is a communication plan in place right up front, especially when dealing with such a diverse audience." Okay, you're the interviewer.
Uh-huh.
What did you hear about the first candidate's character? What did you hear about the second candidate's character? And who would you hire if that was the only question you had to ask?
Well, I know who I'd hire. I'd hire candidate B.
And why?
I would hire candidate B for a number of reasons. Candidate A seems to have kind of an all or nothing kind of approach to life. Things didn't go just exactly, so he was out of there, basically. You can be in or you can be out. And it sounded, it was like that black and white to that person. That's one thing. The other thing sounded like he wasn't really married to the team. He wasn't really, he or she was not really a part of the team because, you know, we sink or swim together. And sometimes it is difficult. It's kind of like in a marriage. Sometimes it's really difficult. But if we're all on the same team, uh, nobody can be an island, not really very successfully. So that's another thing that comes through. The other thing is, it sounds like the person wasn't very flexible in seeing options. That there were other possible paths to take. And then lastly, the first person didn't have a plan for remedy other than bugging out. My remedy strategy is an exit strategy. So that would be my reason for discounting A. And for preferring B, sounds like B is more realistic, um, flexible, foresighted, um, and like you say, you can't really groom those things. If they haven't come into place when somebody's a young adult, if those elements of character aren't there by then, you're probably not going to teach them. And that's the kind of person I'd want on my team. So that am I a good employer there, or am I a astute employer?
You are an astute employer. You would be a great interviewer because you're listening. You're not so much caring about when they ask you those questions, when they're asking you those simple storytelling questions. That's what they're listening for. And did you hear when Dr. Simon assessed the answer? He assessed it primarily on character. That was the differentiator between the two. If on paper both of those people had the same credentials in terms of competence, character would have been the deciding factor of who got that job.
Well, so once again, folks, character matters. Um, and perhaps you agree, perhaps you just have a question, perhaps you'd like to chime in with a few thoughts of your own. In any case, give us a call. We've got about 10 minutes to go in the program tonight, but we still have time for a phone call or two. So give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'll make a couple of announcements here for the coming week. Once again, we should be live next week, next Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, and 4 p.m. Pacific Time on Character Matters. And there will be another post on the blog at manipulative-people.com this Friday, where we'll be previewing my upcoming book with Dr. Kathy Armistead, our second book together, The 10 Commandments of Character, How to Lead a Significant Life. And I invite you to check out the schedule for the workshops that I'm going to be doing. The next round of workshops that I'm going to be doing, a couple of weeks apart, are going to be in the Chicago metro area, and even as far as Madison, Wisconsin. So I know that folks in that area will want to get information from either the crosscountryeducation.com website or from the blog site at manipulative-people.com under the sitemap tab at workshops and seminars on the blog. So mosey on over to manipulative-people.com and take a look at the schedule. If you're interested in coming, I'd be happy to have you, whether or not you're a mental health professional or just someone interested in learning more about the disturbed characters in your life. Happy to have you attend. So we have a few moments left of the program. We've had a great interviewer. Well, here I am speaking like I'm complimenting myself. We have a great interviewee here today that I've been interviewing, who's had experience in several Fortune 100 companies and has been a developer of leadership teams and leadership rules for these companies. She knows what leadership is all about. She knows what building strong corporate cultures is all about, what integrity in business is all about, and what employers especially are looking for in the way of the character of their employees that can meld well with a corporate culture that means to not just survive and make money, but means to thrive and prosper in the workplace by offering an honest product and behaving in an ethical fashion and growing and serving the public's need and making a profit in the process. Ours is a system, it's a very unique system, this free enterprise system. And it all hinges on character. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're operating a small little farm stand and you're trying to make a buck selling corn at your neighborhood market or farmer's market. It doesn't matter whether you've got a small little enterprise like that or you're a kid on the corner with a little lemonade stand trying to see how it all works. If you bring a person of integrity to the table, you offer a decent product at a decent price and make the customer your business and satisfying the customer, offering a good product at a good price, you're going to do well. And so many times today in our mass culture of entitlement, that whole notion has been lost. I don't think people really understand how it works anymore. And so I'm going to surprise our guest tonight by asking her a question about that, because I've often thought about that. It seems to me, and I just want your thoughts on this, Patricia. Seems to me that in our present day culture, folks are too disconnected from the basis of how a free society has to operate and prosper, that they don't really get it at any level about what makes it all work. All they seem to have on their mind is, what do I need to do to survive? And what can somebody help me? How can somebody help me to survive? They don't seem to have that big picture of how it all fits together, how all the different puzzle pieces fit together, and what constitutes a society that functions and prospers and doesn't needlessly hurt or oppress its people or eventually bring itself down. I just want to hear your thoughts on that topic.
Well, there's an old saying that comes to mind, one for all and all for one. I don't think we can ever forget the person's individual needs, the need of a person for survival and to make sure that they take care of their own selves and their families. But I totally agree with what you're saying. If that is in a vacuum, we cannot make the whole of society work. We are all interconnected. If one person stands alone and takes care of their needs, they eventually will no longer thrive on their own. It's a false premise that if you just take care of yourself, you're going to be okay. It's a false premise because what you are relying on to take care of yourself is the rest of society and the community in which you live. Mm-hmm. So everyone must take care not only of themselves, but to make sure that the community and society sustains itself mm-hmm. so that it can thrive and you can continue to thrive. One without the other doesn't work.
Well, it's been a very great pleasure to have you here tonight. And folks, I want to encourage you once again to make yourself, do yourself a favor, mosey on over to Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, get yourself a copy of the interview answer, 10 Essential Tips for Acing Your Job Interview by Patricia A. Flaherty. Clearly, Ms. Flaherty knows what she's talking about. And You can also get the book in ebook format. I also want to mention the fact that next week's program will again be live here on Character Matters. And I want to invite you to avail yourself of my books as well, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, the go-to book for understanding the manipulators in your life, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, the book where I go into more depth about all the disturbed characters out there and how they impact your life, how to understand them, and especially how to get the right kind of help when you're trying to deal with them. And my book for the Christian faith community, The Judas Syndrome, about how genuine faith lived out and in practice can truly transform a life. And then my first book with my co-author, Dr. Kathy Armistead, How Did We End Up Here? And my soon-to-be-released book at the end of the summer with Dr. Armistead, The 10 Commandments of Character, How to Lead a Significant Life. Should be out toward the end of the summer. I'll have more information for you as the weeks go on. So next program will be live as well, and invite you to give us a call anytime at 718-717-8296. You can write the number down. You can call at the beginning of the program as well. I take calls anytime during the program once we get a few bits of information out of the way. So once again, a big thank you for Patty to guest on the program tonight. Once again, I'm sorry. I just can't help calling you Patty. But Miss Flaherty had some really important information here about the importance of character. And once again, as you hear the theme that closes out this program, I can't emphasize this enough. We live in a place where some folks had an idea about the capacity of folks to govern themselves. They knew that if you gave folks with a solid internal moral compass, a rock-solid moral compass, if you left those folks alone, if you didn't oppress them, if you didn't try and micromanage their lives, if you didn't intrude upon all the nooks and crannies of their lives, if you left them alone, gave them maximum freedom and liberty, that folks like that would just naturally tend to prosper. They'd naturally tend to innovate, and they naturally tend to bring one another along for the ride. They would naturally tend to look out for one another, to network with one another, and to build and do great things. That's how great societies are founded. We have some candidates promising to make America great again. Well, we'll be great when we are great. We'll be great collectively when we are great individually. Great how? Great in character. You heard Ms. Flaherty talk about the 3 C's that interviewers in corporate cultures are looking for. The first C being character. It really counts. It matters in every aspect of our lives. It affects every single aspect of our lives. And we need to do our part, each one of us, to make of ourselves the best we can be. That's doing our part. And to encourage one another to be of the kind of character that helps keep our families strong, keeps our communities strong, and in turn helps keep our country strong. America's greatness has never resided really in her economic clout or her military might, but in the character of her people, upon whom the survival of freedom depends. So with that, I'm Dr. George Simon. Thanking you for tuning in, inviting you to tune in again next week. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.